Good afternoon. My name is De'Ann Weimer. I am here on behalf of Citizens for North County. I am Group 1. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. It's good to see you all. You're all very fortunate to be inside instead of outside where it's a little humid. I'd like to begin with reference to something that Gary Barbario mentioned earlier today, which is how you are responsible for following the elections code. And that's a very important thing to follow. And procedures and how you do things are important to create a level playing field and fairness. And one of the things that I did this year was I went to the California Coastal Commission to a meeting that was held in Chula Vista. And I noticed how important process was in their deliberations. And I started looking at some of the details that they provide about how they would like cities to respond to the Coastal Commission when they're proposing changes and how other groups may do so. And in that process of looking at how they run their system, I began to feel that perhaps what the Coastal Commission requires of the city for a plan might be somewhat in conflict with the elections code deadlines that you are dealing with here tonight. And so I just wanted to bring them to your attention and to the city clerk's attention. So as I read it, if the city council approves the Caruso 8515 plan tonight, then the council will not be able to comply with the Coastal Commission's regulations concerning public participation for the local coastal programs. A local coastal program, by definition, has two elements: a land use plan and a local implementation plan. A land use plan has been approved by the Coastal Commission for the Agua Hedionda Lagoon area, but there isn't a local implementation plan. That means that the 8515 plan would act as an amendment to the existing land use plan, which must be approved by the Coastal Commission in order to be effective, as has been referred to earlier. The section I'm focused on is 13515 of the Coastal Commission's regulations. It sets forth mandatory requirements that a local agency must satisfy when preparing a land use plan. I have a copy of the relevant regulations for the city clerk to review, and I'll be happy to give them to you when I'm done. Under subsection D, it provides the notices of hearings held by the local government on the local coastal program or an element thereof must be provided to the public 10 working days before the hearing. Notice for this hearing was formally provided either at the August 18th City Council when the signatures were accepted or when the agenda went up on the 21st, whichever you choose. The longest of that is 7 days ago. Therefore, the Council has failed to satisfy the requirements of the 13515 Section D and could not act on this proposal tonight. Additionally, subsection C provides another public participation requirement that the city has not satisfied. C provides that materials concerning the proposed local coastal program or element thereof must be made available to the public 6 weeks prior to the local government's final action. Subsection A defines those local coastal program materials to include studies. The city's 9212 report falls within the category of a study, but it was released for public review only 2 weeks ago, so 2 weeks instead of 6. Since the city has failed to satisfy the requirements of Section 13515, subsection C, the City Council cannot act on this tonight. I realize that's a conflict between your election code and the Coastal Commission. So that is what I wanted to bring to your attention tonight in terms of process. I also would like to bring to your attention a petition that I think has been referred to by many have heard about. We were able to obtain over 1,000 signatures from Carlsbad residents who wanted you to let this issue go to a vote of the people. And that is our never-ending message. Let this go to a vote of the people. That signature number is now up to over 1,400, and probably by tonight will be 1,500. And that's very important, that this community is facing a divisive issue and needs the ability to vote. And so let me run through, if I may, some of the reasons we think it's important that the community be allowed to vote. Residents who signed this initiative and received the marketing materials believed they were signing to put the item on the ballot. They and all of Carlsbad should be allowed to vote on that issue. Caruso affiliated wants the Carlsbad City Council to adopt the initiative and not put the proposal to a vote. Why? Well, Caruso affiliated Senior Vice President Rick Limo told North County business leaders, "Imagine what an election could do to this town. It would split this town. An issue that divides this town should be put to a vote." Are you pulling the hook on me? Is that what that's about? With no lights, or is that an act of God? Okay. So under this proposal, the City Council and voters give up control of the 200-plus acres that make up the 8515 plan for 15 years. That means the only influence city staff could exert is ministerial. That is clerical. A suspension of city authority should be voted on by the residents. Where are the actual plans? Other city governments have had the opportunity to see the actual construction plans for proposed Caruso-affiliated projects before they accepted the project or rejected it. Why is Carlsbad treated differently? If residents want to see the plans, they will have to vote down the proposal, forcing Caruso-affiliated to release their construction plans and go through a more normal building process. Again, Carlsbad needs to vote. Caruso-affiliated says what they build in Carlsbad will be like the Grove in L.A. The Grove receives more traffic than Disneyland, yet in its plan, Caruso-affiliated claims it would only be responsible for 5% of the traffic generated at nearby intersections. Plus, the $8 million they would give to solve traffic problems would resolve those issues and would take care of 100% of the problems at Cannon and I-5. And the question to this whole community, I think, is, do Carlsbad residents find that plausible? Do you find that plausible? Residents should be able to vote on a claim like that. Mr. Limo also said that the city's 9212 report is nothing less than a peer review stamp of approval for its self-drafted environmental impact analysis. But the third-party analysis attached to the 9212 report raises questions that have been crippling to other projects. The analysis repeatedly points out solutions to these questions are not addressed by this concept. If Carlsbad is going to skip normal environmental analysis of a project, not know the impact of this project on air quality, water quality, exposure to contaminated soils, residents should be able to vote to do so. It's an important issue. Carlsbad benefits from years of good planning activities. Abandoning those practices to build a mall on a jewel of Carlsbad should be voted on by all of the people. Please, we ask you to let this issue go to a vote so that you and all of us will have additional time to assess in greater detail this particular project. Now, there was a lot of talk earlier about the conversations that Caruso-affiliated has had with this community. And I want you to know that with 2.5 to 3 years ago, Caruso-affiliated did come to a number of environmental organizations. They came to Friends of Aviara, of which I am a part. And they said, we want to have a dialogue. And we said, great, there's a lot of things we think we should hear about. There's a lot of things you could do with SDG&E that would provide some real cutting-edge technology where we would be so proud to say this technology came to Carlsbad first. And we didn't hear from them again. We weren't able to have that conversation. We weren't able to have a conversation on the difficulties of trying to have purer water when you have oil-based runoff that you have to deal with, as well as agricultural-based runoff. They didn't have those detailed conversations with us. Instead, they opted to meet with other people in the community and show them pictures of storefronts from malls around the country and say, which do you like best? That is not a detailed discussion with the city of Carlsbad. It's fine, it's appropriate at the end of the process, but it isn't the process. The process is having the hard conversations with the people who have spent hours focusing on these issues and trying to make the city planning process better. That's the appropriate conversation to have. We want you to ask them to have that conversation with us as a community, and the only way we think you can do it is by putting it to a vote of the people. Please, let us vote. This is too important to our community. Finally, that's all right. I've grown accustomed to the sound. The question about circumventing CEQA. You didn't have any control over the circumvention of CEQA. The community of Carlsbad didn't have any control over circumventing CEQA. That comes from a decision made by the California Supreme Court last year in August that creates a giant hole that these types of projects can go through. It's not our responsibility, but we need to solve it.
Thank you.